Okay, so in the last session, we saw how to query the data. Funny thing, I just, instead of overwriting the data, I removed the whole directory. So we're going to have to do that again. But this time, I want to use LiveView to do a little bit of the rendering on the screen. So let's get started. The way we generate a LiveView app is very similar to how we do a Phoenix app. It only takes an extra switch called LiveView. So called live. So binoculars. Yeah. So let's just do that, and let's have the dependencies installed. And so again, like I mentioned in the previous session, we want to, we were actually able to render tables. So this is the result of select star from users. We want to be able to do that, and the place where we stopped in the previous session was we were able to run destructive queries on the database, which we don't want to do. So for that, ideally we should create a user which only has read-only permissions on the database. So let's find that. So let's say Postgres create a read-only user. Yeah, I think there's a good post about it on Stack Overflow. So accept all cookies. So yeah, see, this one is a good post. And it says we can doing this will give access to this user, access to public schema to this user, and we can create a role like that. So what we'll do now is actually first let's get the basic thing working, right? So cd to binoculars, and this time I don't want to use code because it's a little hard for me to move around in it. So I'm just gonna use my own editor here, and we want to be able to render a text box with a button, click, and run the query, right? So if you quickly go to the router, there's already a LiveView wired up here. So let's spin up the server, and usually the way I run the server is I do this IEX -S mix Phoenix server. The difference between mix Phoenix server and this is it even gives you an IEX terminal in which you can run like arbitrary commands, and you don't have to open another IEX session to do stuff. So we've got that running, and I want to just go to localhost 4000. Oh, we already had that there, but okay. And it renders the stock view. What we want to do here is go to app.html. So the way Phoenix works is Phoenix has 3 levels of layout. So if you look at lib binoculars template, you see in the layout we have app, live, and root. And root has the full HTML, like the doc type and everything. And app is app uses the LiveView. App uses the root, and live also uses the root, I think. Yeah. So root is kind of common between app and live. And live is the layout which is used. Live is the layout which is used for LiveView pages, and app is used for normal Phoenix, controller pages. So now what we want to do is we want to go to root and get rid of the Phoenix image. We don't want that. We might even want to get rid of this, but for now let's keep it that way. And this would be in the page live HTML, right? the welcome and all that, right? So we have all of this in the page live HTML LiveView template. So what we want here is really, instead of this form for suggest, which actually looks for dependencies. So if I search for Phoenix, it's going to do some autocomplete for Phoenix and give us the result using LiveView. But we don't want that. So what I'm going to do is just yank this thing out and delete the rest. So now we have a form. And this form, I also want to change it. Actually, let's get rid of the whole thing. So that, and now we want a form, right? So we want a form whose action is nothing, and method is nothing, and that's the form. And when it is submitted, right? So say Phoenix submit. When the form is submitted, what do we want to do? We want it to hit the backend and run execute. I hope that's the way you do it in LiveView, but let's see. And then we have the submit button, which is submit value is execute, right? And we want a text box, right? A text area, really. Text area. I don't care about the, oh boy. We don't care about the ID. The name is query, and that looks good. So we got a text area where we want to run select star from users, and it should, when we hit enter, it should do the right thing, get the data and render it. That's what we want. Now, if you look at the logs, when we did this, it tried to go hit the handle event function with an execute message and a query with this value. And yeah, so it essentially hit the page LiveView. So if you go to page live, so there's a lot of stuff here. So just to get just to give you guys an idea of how LiveView is set up, I'm gonna get rid of all of this. Actually, let's have just this, right? And if we do this, hopefully it's gonna complain. Let's see, if we refresh this, it's not complaining, which is okay. I guess it has a default mount implementation, or maybe we should look at the logs in here. No, looks like it's working, right? So it's able to render. That's good. Now what we want to do here is as soon as it renders, let's say we type select star from users and hit execute, and at that point it's going to break because there's no handle event callback set up to handle this particular argument structure. Yeah, so there's no match for this. So what we do is we say implementation to def handle event, and looks like this guy takes 3 arguments. The first is the message. The second is something. Let's see. So what we want to do here is let's look at the documentation real quick. There's nothing there. Okay. So handle event takes, if you look at this, it takes the name of the messages execute, and then it takes some values, which are like some params, and then the socket, right? So we know that from the data. So if we hit the execute function and we get the query, right? And we get the socket. We want to execute this and render the response, right? So for now, I'm just gonna log it to the screen. Say executing query, and we'll just no reply socket. We won't do anything. So if we say foo, it should, in the backend, it shouldn't edit out anymore. So if we say foo, it doesn't edit out anymore. So that's good. That's good. It says executing foo, but it's not really doing anything. So what we want to do here is we want to do the same thing we did earlier, where we said result set is equal to ecto.query.execute ecto.sql query.sql, or let me just Google for that. Run raw SQL in Ecto. We'll just set the same article, copy this, and put it here. And so this is Ecto adapters SQL, right? And we won't use the SQL coming in like hard-coded SQL. We'll just use the SQL which is passed as an input. And we do that. We set the result set. And once we have that, we want to assign result set to the socket. So I'll say result set is result set. Now, when we do that, so we could assign this, or we could say we have columns is result set dot columns, and rows is result set dot rows, and then number of rows is result dot number of rows. Is it? I hope that's it, but let's see. It's gonna fail. So I'm just gonna make this bigger. No reply assign undefined function result. So yeah, we have result set number of rows. Okay, so that looks good. And in the view, which is page live HTML EEX, we want to render the results, right? So we'll say if number of rows equal to 0, then we'll say no data found, right? So no data found. But otherwise, we'll try to render the data. So I'll say else. We'll try to render the table. So I'll say table td. We want to render the header first, so that's columns. So for column in columns, and that's actually at columns because we want to read it from the assigns, and just yank this and put it in here. So we have a tr, th, and column, right? So we got that. That's the header, and now we want to get the rows. Yeah. So for rows, let's say row, we'll do the same thing that we did in the earlier session. Yep. So we got that, and then we'll also need another for cell in row to. We need that, and this is the cell. or the data. And okay, so I'll just quickly change that. So that's good. We've got this. And now if we go to this page, it says add number of rows not available. That's because the first, so we're setting this only when the query is executed, right? Or like when somebody hits this button. But the first time it's rendered through the mount function. And at that time, we don't have any defaults for these things. So we should set up that too. So I'll say implement to def mount. So mount also takes 3 functions. Sorry, 3 arguments. And wow, I don't think my editor is set up properly. So let's quickly Google for Phoenix LiveView and look at the documentation and see what mount has. So mount has params. Params. Oh, what's this? That looks like a params 2, but that's probably what is mount? Mount is argument 1, which is params, and then session and socket. Okay, so we don't have a use for the session either. So I'll say params, session, and socket. And what kind of response does it expect? An OK socket. So we'll just say OK socket because we don't really want to do anything special here. So all good. But the only thing though is we want to set some defaults here, right? So we'll use this, say OK, and columns is an empty list, and rows is an empty list, and number of rows is 0. So that should do it. So here it says no data found. That's fine. And if we say select star from users and execute, it's doing something, but it looks like it failed. So here, if you look at the data, at the logs, it says my app repo is not available, of course. So it's Binoculars repo. And let's see, select star from users. I'm gonna put this in my clipboard. And there's another error. What's the error this time? It says number of rows not found in columns, and so it's actually called num rows. So we'll fix that by changing this to num rows, and execute. Oh boy, select star from users. Execute this. Awesome, we got this. Seems to be a problem with our rendering, so we'll check that in a sec. We got TRTH. It's definitely something wrong here. Can't see what's wrong. So let's see. Select star from users. Execute. We got. Let's look at this guy. So we got multiple TRs. Yeah, so we don't want this guy. We want this guy to be just one row for the column. So select star from rows. That looks good. That's what we wanted. And we could also say select star from rows, users, select star now. You know, the query could be anything. So it doesn't matter. As long as it executes, we're going to render it. So that's good. And we're also using LiveView, so it's like really fast. There's one problem though, like we don't really, this not really state that the data that's rendered here. So let me quickly show you guys what I mean. So if we look at observer, I'll start the observer. And look at the processes, applications, And where's the, oh boy. So this is it's gonna be hard to find the LiveView process. But yeah, I have another idea. So what we're gonna do here is when we render this, we're also gonna render the PID of the process so that we can do better debugging. So go back to page live, and here we'll also pass this guy something called PID, and we'll do this even here. Just okay, there's one. Okay, and in the HTML, we'll just render it here at the top. I'll say PID is PID, so that's good. All right, so what's wrong here? Page live, PID is that, PID is that. Okay. Oh, it's not implemented. So what we'll do is we'll say instead of self, we'll do an inspect on this guy, and we'll do an inspect on this guy too. Inspect. That's the PID, and if we run select now, the PID is the same, so it's good. We need to look at that PID. I want to look at that PID. So the way you do that is there's a PID. PID takes the three parts, or it can even take the whole binary, right? So we'll just give it the binary. So I'll say PID is P is PID this guy, and we want to look at the state of this guy. So I want to see what this. So when we're using LiveView, right? Like let's take a step back. So when we're using LiveView, what happens is the server is going to have one process per page running on our Erlang VM, and that process is going to talk to the page via the WebSockets. So if you look at the network, it's going to be a WebSocket connection, which is this guy, and these two guys, right? So this guy, so the WebSocket is the link between a process on the server whose PID is this, which is up all the time. I mean, it's not like it rendered the page and died off. So it's up as long as this tab is open. As soon as we close the tab, that process is going to go away, but it's going to stay there as long as this process is live. This tab is live. So what I want to do is I want to see what data does that process on the server hold. So we can use get state from the sys module to get the state of the process that's running on the server side. So what it's doing is it holds a few things: components, serializers, socket, assigns, columns, and so this is where this is the meaty stuff, right? So this guy has something called a socket. So if you say this guy, look at the socket assigns rows, right? So it stores the actual data that's being rendered here. Now, what would happen if we say select generate series 1 to 1000, right? Like if you have a like a query which gives us like a lot of data, and then we look at the size of that guy on the server, it's gonna be huge, right? So So yeah, I mean, we can, it's probably a, yeah, get state P, and it's gonna byte size. Yeah, byte size isn't available on this guy. But the size of that, like that table is going to be huge, and we don't have to store that data, right? So it doesn't have to be stored. So LiveView actually has an escape hatch for that called a temp assign. So if we search for temp, tempo, what is it called? Temp. Oh, come on. Temporary assign. Assigns a temporary. Okay, temporary assigns. So temporary assigns. So by default, all assigns are stateful. But what we want is we want to use temporary assigns in this instance. So that's what we're gonna do. So we're gonna say go back, and here, you know, we'll just create a simple helper called table, and this guy takes a socket and columns and rows and the number of rows, and it's gonna do the right thing. I'm gonna fix that. So what it's gonna do here is it's gonna do the right stuff. So instead of doing this, we'll be calling table socket columns, rows, and number of rows is that, right? And what this guy does is it takes the socket, and what it's going to do here is it's going to say, if you look at the documentation, it's actually not part of the socket now. It's part of a separate element in the tuple called temporary assigns. So we'll do just that. So we'll just say socket, and then table. Table doesn't need a socket. So we're gonna get rid of that. And temp assigns is a list. It's a keyword list containing all the data. So we're gonna say socket temporary assigns. Is that what it's called? Yep. Okay, this is good. This is good. Now we got that, and we're gonna do the same here. Yeah. So I'll say socket, and then temporary assigns is table, but in this case we have columns, we have rows, and we have number of rows, right? So we got that. I'm gonna get rid of this, close the tuple there. Okay, so all good, hopefully. Now let's refresh the page. I got a new PID, that's good. So I'll copy that, and let's look at the state of that data. So if we go here, I will say P is PID this guy, and we look at socket assigns, right? Or just look at the socket. Or let's just look at the state of this guy. So this guy has assigns. Oh, he has columns, flash. So all these are empty though. So let's see what happens. We're gonna run a query, select generate series 1 to 1000. Okay, and if we execute it, and it's an error, invalid return binocular web handle event callback, no reply socket. Okay, so this, all right, so temporary assigns can be returned in the mount endpoint. Okay. So I guess here here we're just marking the messages key as a temporary assign, and that's what we're doing. We're also probably setting the shape of the data here. So if you look at the state here, what do we have? We have assigns, all this changed. Okay. All right. So let's do that. Right. So with this new info, we're saying that temporary assigns is just a marker which tells LiveView what are the things that it should not be tracking. So we're saying it shouldn't be tracking these things. Well, yeah, just these two. Right? Number of rows is okay. Well, I mean, technically it's part of the same group, so I'm just going to move that too. So temporary assigns has these things, right? So these are the things that we're asking LiveView not to track. And the way we assign data again to that thing is gonna be the same. So I'll say assign socket, and oh boy. Okay, so we'll do a little bit of repetition here. Columns is that. Rows is that. Number of rows is that. Okay, so we got that. Let's get rid of the table. All right, all good. Hopefully that works. Let's see. If we go back here, PID is not available. So let's set that. We'll say socket when it is set up the first time. We'll assign the PID as self inspect. So now if we say select generate series 1-2000. Okay, so we got all this right now. The time of reckoning, we want to look at the data that's stored when we ran that query. Yeah, so we say P is PID for this binary, and if you look at the state and if you look at the assigns, the columns is empty, the rows is empty, and the number of rows is actually 0. So that's actually not sensible. But are we rendering it anywhere? We can probably render it somewhere. So let's render it. So page live HTML. So I'll say number of rows found. Okay. So yeah, that's an assigns. So we want to use an at. And we say select star from users. We done it, and it says 2 rows found. That's awesome. But the thing to look at here is this guy, right? So we look at that guy, and we say paid off. This guy is columns is empty, number of rows is 0, and rows is empty. So the point here is now we're not, keeping this huge state around, because we don't need it. Right? This is not state that we want to track. We just want to render it